Go live here. All right. Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Well, this is June now. It's June the 6th right now. And our guest today is Mike Allen. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Mike.
That's good.
Thanks for having me on.
So get a few things out of the way here. Why don't we do introductions first, and then I've got a couple of notes and then talk to Mike. So, Bridget, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I am Bridget. I'm a creator of music and art, horror fan.
And you've got a Kickstarter coming up soon.
Coming up soon, yes, very soon.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about
Do you
it?
have a date yet?
No, I don't have an exact date yet because taking some advice, I'm rehashing some stuff, so I don't want to put out an exact date just yet.
Okay.
Well, from what I've seen, it's going to be very successful. So, all right, Rick.
I'm Rick Lay, writer and pulp magazine collector, and I'm currently under attack by phone calls from scammers telling me that my Apple device, which I don't own, is under attack. So
You too.
So I have to mute myself during the call, that's why.
Sure. Matt Carpenter.
Hi, I'm Matt. I run eZine Movie Night, and in case you hadn't figured it out, we didn't have a movie night last night. Instead, this week and next week, it's Friday. Friday at the usual time, 9 p.m. Central Time, US. We open the party on Cast about an hour before that, listen to a few things, and the movie starts, or the show starts about 9 p.m. Central Time. And we watched the first 2 episodes of Alice in Borderland, the series from Japan. The other thing is we do have a prize today, but it is provided by my colleague.
Bridget Brindmark.
It is, yes. She has a DVD of Event Horizon, a Blu-ray special edition. Great Lovecraftian sensibilities in the movie. If you want to win it, send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com. Put event in the subject heading. We'll draw a winner in about 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. It could be you, but only if you enter.
Yes,
You can't win if you don't play.
It's a collector's edition that just came out a couple of months ago.
So, quite a prize, and thank you, Bridget.
And quite Lovecraftian. So, all right. So earlier today, I posted a blog post at Lovecraft eZine, lovecraftezine.com, and the post was just basically about recent events at Lovecraft eZine. For example, I just posted our from about 2 weeks back our podcast about Shudder and the other movies that we've seen, and talked about a few upcoming movies, that sort of thing. And as usual, it went in all kinds of different directions. So, but it was a fun chat, and it's now on audio, and I've linked to that. So for those of you who want to listen on the go, that's available now. And then the next thing I posted about, and you can go there for yourself. It's the first post on there after the highlighted posts. Posted the video for today, and then on Tuesday we've got another old time radio episode. This is episode 4, and I've been doing this on Tuesday nights when we don't have quiet horror. Once in a while I skip a Tuesday night, but I'm trying not to. And what it is just basically just like this live show, only you don't see our faces. You see what you see the show only, and you listen to the audios. So I've got 2 up. One is Suspense Ghost Hunt from the 40s or early 50s, but I think 40s. And this is probably the first example of a found footage piece of fiction. So I can't think of anything earlier, and it's very good. So it's audio only, of course, but it's basically found footage. So, and then the second one is Quiet Please, and it's called There Are Shadows Here. Now, Quiet Please is a really good, creepy series. And anyway, of course, you can go online and listen to all this stuff anytime you want, but I'm trying to hand pick what I think are the best ones. I've been listening since I was a kid, so sort of narrow them down, and you can chat live with us while you listen to the show. And then, of course, we've got a Patreon podcast for those who are patrons, which is $5 a month to get in on this. And of course, there's extra rewards at extra levels. But Rick and Stephen Mark Rainey are going to talk about Dark Shadows. We had a request from one of our patrons. And so if you're not a patron, you can become one and listen to that. I'll have details coming up on the Patreon podcast. And then I also posted about movie night, which Matt has already talked about. It's another Friday this week, and then it's back to the regular Saturdays, right? Okay, you're muted, but I'm going to take that for a yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right, so something really cool. If you're watching live, we've got super chats now. My very cool son did this for me. If you look at the bottom left on the text chat, you can, I don't know how this works. You can choose one or two things. Kenneth did it last week and it worked. So if you want to throw a tip out there and support the podcast, that's a nice way to do it. You know, if you don't feel like becoming a patron or anything, or even if you do, whatever. I appreciate all the support, but I think those super chats are pretty cool. Now, I've taken the plunge. I wish Melissa was here to listen to this, but I am now on Goodreads, and I've got my books in a link in the show notes. So if you guys are interested in what I'm reading, go there. I just finished The Wolfen, which I think you just finished too, right, Bridget? And Melissa did too.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I watched the movie the other night.
You watched the movie? How did the movie compare to the book?
Nothing like it, but it was still decent. And you know, I was forewarned about Albert Finney's 80s headband by Matt beforehand, so I definitely thumbs up for the headband.
It looks like we got a
Okay, wait,
latecomer.
Bridget, did you want him to break into a chorus from a song by Loverboy?
That's okay.
Yes, yes, or Rocky, because he might have been wearing sweats in that scene as well. Or lots of possibilities.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, I joined on my phone because I can't seem to get my computer to connect.
It's probably a picnic error.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sure.
Well, anyway, you look fine. So it's coming through
But,
fine.
yeah, okay.
Pete Rollick, you want to introduce yourself?
I am Pete Rollick, computer failure.
So what do you have coming out next, Pete? Book, short stories, that kind of thing.
I don't know.
'Cause if you're not reading Pete Rollick, you should. Or what have you had? What's been published in the last 6 months or so?
That I don't know. Oh, the Book of Yig came out.
Yeah.
That's it was a collection of novellas from a bunch of people, including myself, and I don't have any copies anymore because I just sold them all. So I can't even reference who was in it. But more importantly, coming out this fall is the Miskatonic Miskatonic University Spiritualism Society. It's a Lovecraftian ghost story set at Christmas.
That
Which
sounds
is-
great, actually.
Traditional.
Where's that going to come out?
Jack and Apes Press is putting it out as a chapbook. It's a novella.
Okay. Well, you'll tell us ahead of time, right? Because there's got to be a limited number if it's a chapbook.
Yeah, I think so. But
Yeah, I got to buy one of those.
okay, we'll get you one.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Set one aside for me. I'll pay for it, if you can.
Okay.
I am so terrible at keeping secrets. I told myself I was not going to do this. Hey, everybody, I'm reading your comments. I'm glad you're here too. Reading your comment. I just am not good at this, Pete. I've got about 50 books that you're really going to love. I mean, we're not talking about trade paperbacks of, you know, I don't want to name anybody because I'll offend somebody, but it's some good stuff. Lovecraftian, nonfiction, a lot of those. So, yeah. So no cost, just sending them in the mail to you so that you can put them on, keep them or put them on Arkham.
Okay, but
your group.
I tend to read everything before, but yes.
Well, then you're going to be holding on to them for a while.
Yeah.
But a lot of them you may have read.
Okay.
So,
My TBR pile.
If you send them to me, I'll give them out as prizes.
and by the way, Bridget and Matt, you guys don't have to mute unless you got some noise in the background, like if Rick's got his phone ring or something. Otherwise,
I know it doesn't mute any of the other speakers at all, so it's really useless.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you can hear the thunderstorms or not, but.
Did you see the video that Danielle took last night?
Yeah, that was creepy and awesome.
Yeah, she was walking the dog, and then there was like these. That was some great lightning. Great lightning show. So anyway, oh hey, Mike Downs just did the super chat thing for $5. Thank you, Mike. See the mics here. They're just good people. They're just good people. You know, Bridget's husband's name is Mike too, and there's Mike DeBronzo. You know, he's probably watching live, and
we are Legion.
It's the Mike Club.
It's the Mike Club, yeah. So where's your husband? He should be here. It's Mike Day.
I forgot to tell him. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, if anyone hasn't figured it out, I'm Mike Davis. I'm the host of this disaster here. And just my wife says I'm very sentimental, so I'm going to be very sentimental for a minute. I appreciate all you guys coming here every week. I appreciate the people who watch live. Appreciate the people who watch later, and then the vast majority who listen, you know, while they're working out or in their car or walking or whatever. Appreciate you guys too. So I know there's a lot of you out there, and thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of the family. So
Hey, you're here twice.
Yeah, I'm coming in.
Who's the real P?
It only took me 30 minutes.
Oh, I love doppelganger stories.
When you see your doppelganger, it's not usually a good thing.
Oh man, guys, did you see that? Okay, I'm not going to call him a name because I don't have it, but Paul Tremblay, did you see what he posted on Instagram yesterday? Like this Lake Mungo like collection of stuff. It looked awesome. Yeah, he said I asked him where he got it, and he said he got it from the UK, but it plays in any Blu-ray, which I don't have, but that's okay. So I said, well, this reminds me, I emailed him back and I said, this reminds me, I've been wanting to ask you if you want to do a Lake Mungo Patreon podcast with me. And he said, yeah, he'd love to do that. And he suggested Nadia Bulkin too, so I'm going to ask her. So we may be doing that on the 24th, but I'll get back to everybody on that. That should be really fun. I love that movie. So I think Paul introduced me to that movie too, but anyway. All right, we talked about the events. I'm on Goodreads, and you know, just for kicks, why don't we talk to the guest? Hey, Mike, how are you?
No, you don't need to do that.
Don't do that. No. All right. So, okay. Well, first of all, before I forget, Laird said to tell you hello. So,
well, hi, Laird.
Yeah,
you're watching or listening.
No, he's not. He's got something he has to do tonight. Otherwise, I think he was going to stop by. So, you know, we discussed this for a minute before the show, but you've been doing this a long time. You know, a poet, a writer, in, you know, maybe I guess we'd call it the weird fiction community. Right. But for me, at least, you've been under the radar, even though, like, one of your books recently, remind me which one is approaching 10,000 copies sold.
Unseaming. I mean,
Unseaming.
That was my debut collection of short stories in 2014, and it is still selling. I mean, when you mentioned approaching 10,000 copies sold, like literally it's like within 5 copies.
Oh, really?
You know, if I counted like if I counted like giveaways through Kickstarter, I'm over. But you know, in terms
Is
of
this
like
counted?
actual purchases over the internet or at my dealer's table or whatever, it's like right there.
Is this including the Kindle version?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good, because it should. I mean, that's a legitimate copy.
yeah.
So, well,
Yeah.
I have the Kindle version, right? What, Pete? What?
So Mike, I love the Unseaming.
Well,
And-
I remember you reviewed it, which thank you.
And
Actually, that'll be up tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
No. Now, so what Mike hasn't told you is that I've reviewed Industrial Accident.
Oh,
Is that what it was? I forgot.
wonderful.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going-
Well, go ahead.
and that's going up tomorrow.
Wonderful.
Yes, it is. At
Yeah,
Lovecraft eZine.
even if you hate it, I appreciate
No.
it.
You know,
No, yeah, it was only 3 words. He said, "I hate it." No, I think you added "never buy this book." No, he liked it. He liked it.
Well, you know, aftermath of an industrial accident is basically, I mean, I know, you know, short story collections, you don't necessarily think of them as sequels, but I kind of thought of it as my head as the sequel to Unseaming. Unfortunately, it came out during pandemic summer last year, and so you know there were just so many other tides at work, so it hasn't received near the same amount of attention that Unseaming did. So I'm very grateful that you're adding some to that stack. Thanks so much.
So what happens is, you know, this is me working. Mike sends me the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I open it up and I'm like, aftermath of an industrial accident. I've read this story already. Why? Who is, you know? Oh, it's the same person. Yeah.
Right. Oh, so did you read it in Transmissions from Punktown?
I'm in Transmissions from Punktown.
Oh, yes, of course you are. I have a copy of it right over here. So yeah.
Which means you haven't read your own book, but no, that's
Right. Well,
I maybe today we can get you over the 10,000 mark with the audience. So there you go. Audience challenge. Go to Amazon and type in the Unseaming with an A and Mike Allen, ALLEN, and snatch it up.
thanks,
So
everybody.
we'll see if we can get you over the 10,000 mark.
So the funny thing is that, you know, aftermath of industrial accident is very similar in theme to my story, which is called Not for Human Consumption.
Right.
And, you know, they're very different in execution, of course. But, you know, I was like reading this and going, I was like, oh, here's my brilliant idea. And Mike wrote it at the same time as I was writing mine. And I'm like,
Oh dear. Well, I apologize for coming off like a jerk for not having read your contribution to the book as well. But you know, I was so thrilled to be part of that book, though. Yeah.
My 2B read pile is like 50 books deep. And
mine's at least that big.
Well, the next stage of awkwardness is when you read the story and then you forgot that you read the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did that to some friend of mine who was in an anthology.
I'll take it one step forward. Is it's when you read the book, you write the review, and you completely forgot what you've written about the book.
Oh wow!
You have to go back and read your own review to remember what you wrote about. You know, just. But hey,
I've reached a stage. Of course, in my day job, I'm a newspaper reporter, and you know, I'm 52 years old, and I've been a newspaper reporter for over 20 years now. And it is a lot of times I find myself going back and trying to do research on a topic or a person or an issue. And I discover a story that I wrote where I was clearly present when the events I wrote about happened.
Yeah.
And it's all new to me as I read it. So in that sense, I sympathize.
I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking at Pete's review. And Pete says that the aftermath of an industrial accident is set in Punktown. So
yeah, the short story Aftermath of an Industrial Accident, I wrote at the request of Jeffrey Thomas, the creator of Punktown, the same process I presume that Peter went through, or something similar. Brian, here I will use my cheat sheet. I had this nearby in case I got to mention it. So this came out from Dark Regions Press a couple years ago now, and it's a tribute. It's a tribute anthology to Jeffrey Thomas, essentially.
Yeah, read the title for those who are just listening later and don't have video.
Transmissions from Punktown, edited by Brian N. Sammons.
Right.
It's a very, very fat book. Many stories in it. Aside from me and Peter, I believe there's Paul Tremblay, Nick Mamadis, William Pugmire, William Meikle, Don Webb, Scott Jones, Christine Morgan, Joe Pulver, Mike Griffin, just the whole, it's really pretty star-studded.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I kind of suspect that Christine Morgan is just going to sneak up on us and all just slaughter us in our sleep with her stories one day. She is flying so under the radar right now, but her stories are so magnificent. And so anyway, but that's just my opinion.
So I sympathize.
Yeah. So Pete, talk about, you said you really like, sorry, I just went blank.
The Unseaming?
Unseaming. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
But I mean, I want to ask Mike about it, but I want you to say something about it first, because I know you're a big fan.
I have a whole show and tell thing set off to the side here. I realize a lot of your listeners won't be able to see this, but Unseaming, I guess, has the extra weapon of this just astonishing cover by Daniel Tunstall, who's a UK based artist.
Oh yeah, it grabs your attention for sure.
With this woman, with too many hands tearing the flesh of her own back open. Which I saw that and was like, that is like, that is pictorially what my stories are like. I've got to have it. Yeah.
What are some spoiler-free thoughts from you, Pete?
So the Unseaming is what, almost 10 years old now? Is it really?
7 years old.
7 years old.
But stories in it, there are individual stories in it that are much older.
Right.
Like some go back to the 90s.
I thought at the time, I thought the Unseaming was, a really great debut collection of weird fiction. So much so that it sits on my Lovecraftian shelf, because there are stories that are clearly Lovecraftian in that collection, and I think of it as one of the modern mythos books that people should be buying to see where the genre is going. Now, that said, what I'd rather talk about is the collection in Aftermath of an Industrial Accident, which I think is a more mature, more diverse book. I think there's only one or maybe two Lovecraftian stories.
That's fair.
And it shows, I think there are clear inspirations from Philip K. Dick and Harlan Ellison. The fantasy stories are very Robert Silverberg. And you've successfully integrated some of your stories very subtly.
Does Zoom show that I'm blushing?
And it took me a few times to reread it and a couple stories and say, wait a minute, this is set in the same world as this story, and you only catch that if you are carefully reading it.
Which Pete and Rick, they love that stuff.
I'm glad you picked up on that.
And then Blue Evolution is essentially it's masked as a fantasy story, but it's actually a science fiction story.
Right.
And it's done with a very deft hand.
I'm really glad that you liked that story. I'm curious. It's fine if you didn't. I'm curious if you recognize the source of inspiration for it.
I don't. So go ahead and tell me.
Yellow Submarine.
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to say that.
I can see that. Okay.
Well, yeah. The fact that you didn't recognize it is why it was turned down for. Well, I was asked to contribute to an anthology of fiction riffing on the Beatles, which was kind of a wild thing for somebody to ask me to do. Right. And I wrote the kind of story that I would write. And it ended up getting turned down. And like, you having read it, I'm sure you can see why.
Well, okay. So I've been asked to write some things that infringe on other people's IP. And you have to work very, very hard to skirt that.
Right.
And that line. And obviously, I think you did a good job because I don't recognize the connection.
That's fine.
But
thank you.
If it was in a story collection that was marketed as inspired by the songs of the Beatles, then you might recognize it.
Right.
But,
yeah, completely out of context in Aftermath, it's probably much harder, and that's fine by me.
Yeah. So, but this is not just so you open the whole book with this sort of essay / poetry / drabbles of things that frightened you in was it high school or
actually in third grade?
Or okay, elementary school.
Specifically in third grade. That is when the thing happened that kind of made me me.
Yeah, so it's not. They're not stories. They're at best drabbles, maybe a little bit longer than that. But it's kind of what Stephen King does with older kids. These are how little kids see horror and how it affects them. And I think Philip K. Dick did a story called The Zap Gun that was very similar. But yeah, it's sort of, it gets into that childlike feeling that the world is not safe.
I'm very flattered that you made all those connections, and and certainly those are transcriptions of real night terrors that I had, and I definitely did not feel the world was safe. No. As you might guess from that piece. The piece that Peter is talking about was published in Weird Tales during the Anne Vandermeer era, and it's oh my god, I blank on the title of my own book right here as I'm talking about it on the pod.
It's a harlot. Go ahead.
6 Waking Nightmares Poe Gave Me in Third Grade is the name of the piece.
Nice. Real quick on the sidebar here, on the chat, text chat. Cat Pulver says, if possible, can you thank Mike for the shout out regarding transmissions from Punktown and mentioning the Beastie Joe Pulver. And then she quoted something from Joe that I actually have in my notes. So we're on the same wavelength here, Cat. Joe said, after you travel these often blistering and always fantastic poetic nightmares with Mike Allen, the darkness owns your soul and you rejoice in it. So that's high praise. So
I remain so grateful for those words from Joe. So I wonder, something else that I remain grateful for from Joe, although although I really wish he was I really wish he was around now so that these things were working out the way they were originally planned. There are a couple of stories that he solicited from me for anthologies, and they are in this book. I haven't gotten a chance to show what Aftermath of an Industrial Accident actually looks like. This is actually artwork by the same artist who did the cover for UNSEAMING, Daniel Tunstall, with the hand melding into the screaming face there. Again, I looked at
Right.
that and was like, she plucked that from my head. And so there's a story in here called Nolans Volans that I originally wrote from Joe. I don't actually know if he ever got to read it. I hope he did, and I hope he enjoyed it. But I made sure I made sure to thank him in the book. I'm sorry I didn't get to work more with him.
Well, he wasn't just a great writer. He was a great editor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Thanks again, Mike Allen, for doing the super chat thing. I really appreciate it. What you and Pete said a minute ago reminded me. I'm just starting, of all things, Invader Zim. Do you guys know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah,
They've actually made a movie, Invader Zim, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean,
I watched the movie.
I'm going through the series first, but
it's pretty funny.
It's really dark comedy, and I'll just read the best. Okay, so Invader Zim is rife with bleak messages, and that's what makes the satire so compelling. This is from Film School Rejects. In this world, life is a cruel mistress, and the world is a horrible place. The best example of this negative outlook appears in Halloween Spectacular of Spooky Doom, when Dib is the kid who's trying to prove that Zim is actually an alien that wants to destroy the world. When Dib finds himself experiencing horrifying visions, when he informs his teacher of these terrifying hallucinations, she informs him that life is a nightmare and tells him to sit down and deal with it, Dib. We all suffer. I love it, man. So yeah, are you guys? You've watched the series, Pete?
I've caught a couple episodes.
I've seen it.
Yeah, Matt's seen it. Talk to Matt.
You've seen the movie. That's it. Well, my point is that Mike was talking about having some nightmares when you were 3, and realizing the world wasn't a safe place.
Oh yeah.
So, do you want to share those, or just the inspiration for the?
Wait. Okay, this is reminding me of that movie I saw so many times when I was a kid. People will remember the name. About a little kid who sees aliens in his backyard.
Invaders from Mars.
Invaders from Mars. It sounds like.
Love it.
That's what you sounded like. You actually saw the aliens land and no one believed you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That's them. All right. So, Mike, are those private, or do you want to talk about any of those?
I don't mind. I exploit my nightmares all the time. Just looking at the very first piece, the 6 waking nightmares, these were specifically inspired from my first very traumatic exposure to Edgar Allan Poe. My 3rd grade teacher, who meant well and who is in my memory was a great guy, gathered kids around for Halloween, in a circle, and read the Telltale Heart, and read The Raven. That's Poe 101. But I just in 3rd grade just apparently was just psychologically not ready for what was in those stories, and my imagination just went crazy. And I'm not going to like just sit here and read the entire piece to you, but the very first, I liked Peter calling them drabbles. At night, the light fixture above my bed stretched into a pale blue vulture eye, and the emaciated ghost of the man it belonged to swirled out, craggy face contorted in silent accusation as he reached for me. I saw that over and over again, this sort of ghostly form streaming out of the light fixture above me,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And many other things. And, that was kind of like where it started, but then they just sort of evolved into all sorts of different directions. And I still, a lot of my short stories start with like, one of those night terrors or like a vivid nightmare that I had when I was younger. And, I'm scanning I'm scanning Aftermath to see if there might be good examples in there.
Nightmares are not fun, but on the other hand, there's a wealth of material to mine.
Well, it's weird. Like, I used to be really traumatized by my nightmares. As an adult, though, when I wake up from a relatively mundane nightmare, I'm like, oh, that was disappointing. Because I really do kind of hope I'm going to get something inspired out of them. Okay, so there's a story in here called a deaf policeman heard the noise, and it's a very weird, deliberately inconclusive story, but it begins with the narrator as she's trying to sleep, having her wrist grabbed by a ghost, and she's pulled halfway out of the bed, and that that action and what the ghost looks like are from a very vivid and relatively recent dream that I had. But I guess in that story I maybe play it for humor a little bit, which so this is where it doesn't go quite in the Lovecraftian direction. The narrator is this has happened to her so many times that she's not exactly used to it, but she finds it more annoying than frightening at this point. And the story is about her trying to communicate with the ghost, trying to figure out what it wants, why it feels this need to do this. But it gets weirder from there, because it's not the only ghost she's dealing with. But
that's an Aftermath.
Yeah, that is an Aftermath. The one with the fingers sinking into the shrieking face cover.
Well, getting back to the Unseaming just for a second,
sure,
because I think it'd be nice if we could tip you over the 10,000 mark. Anyone out there listening that's on the fence about the Unseaming, it's available in print and Kindle, and it's introduced by Larry Barron. So that's a good reason right there.
It was so wonderful that he did that for me.
Well, he's pretty discerning. So I noticed when you go to Wikipedia and put in your name, Wikipedia has you labeled as a poet, which I know was true at the beginning of your career, right?
Right.
There's lots of poetry in this book.
Yeah,
that's right. Aftermath actually has a slice of my poetry, while Unseaming does. Well, Unseaming actually does have a poem in it, but it's super subtle. It's divided into 3 sections, and the titles of the 3 sections together actually make a poem. But I don't advertise that.
Well, you have now.
Yes, I have. The secret is spilled.
You know what it reminds me of? A show that I like. And in the very first episode, it's the show's about these coroners, and the boss, he's kind of wondering, do I really want to be in this job? Am I going anywhere? So he's been asked to give a speech at a local college, which he really doesn't want to do, but he doesn't turn him down. So he's really nervous about it. When he finally gets there, he like throws away his notes, and he goes, "You want my college advice? Because here it is. Don't follow your father's footsteps. Don't follow anybody's footsteps. Don't become a doctor just because your mother wants you to be a doctor, or because your father never said once that he loved you in your whole lousy life. I don't care. Take that and go do something noble. Go be an artist. Be a poet. Do you understand the courage it takes to become a poet? Find something beautiful in life, even if it's just for a moment. Something that tells you that you're alive and it's going to be okay." That line always stuck with me. Do you know what kind of courage it takes to be a poet? Which,
that's great. I've never heard that passage before.
yeah, well, poetry doesn't pay much in this day and age,
No.
if it ever did.
Although, so I was asked to contribute. I mean, I guess this gets into the definition of what you consider good pay, but I was asked to contribute to the Deadlands, which is a new webzine put out by the folks behind the late Shimmer magazine. If you folks are familiar with that,
I remember Shimmer.
And the Deadlands, which advertises itself as fiction centered around death, not necessarily horror. The editor, the poetry editor for the Deadlands is Sonia Tafe, who's a good friend of mine, and who used to be the one of the poetry editors for Strange Horizons. And she asked me if I would write a poem for the Deadlands, and I did. Even I hadn't written a new poem in a couple of years, so it was kind of a teeny version of the kind of a teeny version of the assassin that has to come out of retirement or something. I had to kind of see if I still had the weapons in the closet. That kind of thing. But I was paid well for a poem for that poem, so I'm a little feather in my hat.
That's great. Kenneth on the live chat, speaking of poetry, he says, does Mike have any plans for a horror poetry collection?
Not for a new one,
but you've got one, right?
So the collection that I have 3 kind of fat collections out there that you can find on Amazon. My first of those, Strange Wisdoms of the Dead, which insanely was picked as an editor's choice selection by the Philadelphia Inquirer. Don't ask me how that happened. I don't. Well,
that's a crappy paper anyway.
Yeah. So that
you're really good at buttering up the guests.
For somebody whose interest is really focused on horror, that might be the one to get. But it's only available in trade paperback.
What's the title again? Sorry.
Strange Wisdoms of the Dead.
Okay.
And it's got some pieces of fiction in it too. The title piece is actually a short story that I co-wrote with a writer who also lives here in Roanoke, Virginia, named Charles Saplick. And that story was originally published in H.P. Lovecraft's Magazine of Horror, if anybody remembers that. But the poetry collection that I'm most likely to point people to, because it also exists on Kindle, is called Hungry Constellations. And Matt, yay. Matt says, I have all the issues of that magazine. So go, Matt.
Yeah, you've inspired Matt to share a poem that he wrote that he's putting on the live chat.
All right.
This is not a good thing.
Have I unleashed a new horror? Is that what?
Yeah,
you're
you
saying?
have. Okay, now Matt, you have to read this.
So, well, while I'm waiting for that to appear, so Hungry Constellations is actually on Kindle. It is selections from my earlier 2 book-length collections, Strange Wisdoms of the Dead and the Journey to Kalesh, and also a bunch of poems since. And that's it was edited by Dominique Parisian, and has an introduction by Amal El Motar, and I feel the need to raise that in part to note that both of those individuals who helped out with my poetry book have since gone on to win Hugo Awards, but I have not. Not even in the running to my knowledge, but so there is some Hugo adjacentness in that book.
Yeah.
All right.
But
Yeah.
it's a pretty good I look at it as kind of like the recap of my poetry career, and has pretty much all of my best work in it. So and if you're looking for something that's available as an ebook, that's pretty much your only option for my poetry. So Hungry Constellations, which I do not have in the stack next to me because I didn't expect to be talking about it.
So Hungry Constellations, and the other one was
Strange Wisdoms of the Dead.
Okay, so that okay, all right. So
in between there's a book called The Journey to Kalesh, which of course I would also endorse, but in terms of like the ones that might apply most to this audience, I think it's the first and last that
Matthew Carpenter.
Yes.
Are you gonna read that? If you
Don't
can
you know some things are better left unsaid?
Well, then why did you write it then?
You
try like a calliope come walking into my study here. She's a muse. What am I supposed to do?
I mean, I could read it if you'd rather, but I think you're the voice for it.
Is this like a poetic sword of Damocles we have over our heads?
No, it's a stupid limerick.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. It's in the comments. I see.
Yeah.
It.
All right, I'm gonna read it because you're not reading it. This is by Matthew
Yes,
Carpenter.
please share this.
In space devoured Captain Sulu, the Enterprise tasted not so bad when well basted, I think, with the crewmen all crying Boothulu. I think I missed the first part, didn't I? Oh yeah, I did. I'm sorry. See, you should be reading this, Matt. A tentacled old one named Cthulhu.
I see a different poem. Oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah, a tentacled old one
you
named
only
Cthulhu.
publish in one medium.
Yeah, the side comments. All right. A tentacled old one named Cthulhu in space devoured Captain Sulu. The Enterprise tasted not so bad when well basted, with the crewmen all crying Boothulu. So this is the work of art. No matter what we're doing, gentlemen and ladies, this is the work of art that will stand the test of time and will be read 1,000 years from now.
I told Isabel I'm quitting my job and I'm just going to poetry slams from now on. You
That's
think
your
spouse is supposed to be supportive of your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I have to point out in continuity era, Sulu never commanded the Enterprise. It's a continuity Excelsior.
Yeah, but you don't know he wasn't visiting over there at some point.
It would be the Excelsior that gets devoured.
Besides, Captain fits the rhyme scheme and Lieutenant gives an extra syllable.
Well,
Sulu did become a captain.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
But Excelsior is Enterprise.
See, Excelsior versus Enterprise, you add syllables and then the rhyme scheme goes to hell.
Well, that will stand the test of time, I'm sure. All right, so I'm looking at your email.
It stands the test of time because I keep repeating it whenever given a chance. So it doesn't go away. It's kind of like mold.
So we can get rid of it by killing you?
Yeah, basically.
If that's what it takes. Mike, in your email to me, I asked you what topics you'd like to address. You said 2020 was a tough sell for my particular strain of extremely weird, extremely violent horror. I wonder if 2020 isn't going to be a kind of lost year for a number of horror titles. I mean, what do you guys think? Did you sell less copies of books in 2020, Mike?
Well, I of the horror titles, definitely. I am not like plugged into like I'm not like plugged into the numbers that you might get, from say the big four or something like that. So I don't know that, say, a book like Mexican Gothic was particularly affected by the difficulties with the industry in 2020. I mean, that was a huge bestseller, and I'm really glad that happened for Sylvia. I know that. Well, I mean, I have flashed a couple of times, that my kind of body horror cover for Aftermath of an Industrial Accident, and the other book that I put out through Mythic Delirium Books. I don't know if you can see it for the Shine. Last year was a Sinister Quartet,
Right.
which you can see. Sort of continuing my motif of, here's an arm that is being peeled open, although not in a bloody way, in kind of a surreal way, and the arm is rising from a pool of buttons. So and that ties into a short story of mine called The Button Bin, that is in Unseaming, and is probably my best known short story, to the degree that any of my short stories are known at all. But this book also has works by three other authors: C.S.E. Cooney, Jessica Wick, and Amanda McGee, and like the other novellas in here are kind of have sort of varying degrees of darkness, with mine probably being the darkest, because that's just how I roll, I guess. And it's not as if these books didn't get attention, but I didn't have the opportunity to take them on the road and try and shill them at conventions, which is often a vital part of this if you're a small press person like myself. And for whatever reason, it always feels a little weird sort of talking about this part of the business, but I think people appreciate it hearing more than not. Unseaming seemed to like be its own sort of engine. It just kind of went and went and went and went. And these newer books, these newer books, I've really had to work hard to kind of get people to notice them. And it's not as if they haven't sold copies, but it hasn't been anywhere near on the same scale. And of course, with my luck, I could see like somebody else in the horror industry who might be watching this or listening to this, like getting in touch with me and say, no, Mike, I think it's just you. I think you were the only one with that problem. But well, I have trouble believing that, just because, of all the events that were canceled, and
small press always has the issue of getting the word out about their books. But, like Sean Hamill was telling me that, he wrote a book called The Cosmology of Monsters, and it sold real well. Stephen King blurbed it. But, because of COVID, Sean wasn't able to do that tour that he wanted to do, that he was slated to do. So I think in person matters less and less, but it does still matter. With the internet, people being able to get a book instantly.
Well, so I feel like a sense that I had in general, though this is only anecdotal, is so many people last year, for good reasons, were just very frightened of real life things happening. and only a relatively small subset of them, although everybody here is probably part of that subset, have the mind frame to say, well, I need some comfort food from these terrifying events, so I'm going to scare myself with a book. I think the audience for that narrowed. I don't have like any scientific data to back that up though, so that's just kind of my experience.
I think it depends on the horror. I'm not so sure, movies and books about pandemics started selling like wildfire, which I don't understand, but it happened.
People were looking for guidebooks.
Yeah, exactly.
Guidebooks of a sort, yeah, sure.
But Mike, you make a good point. I will admit one of the reasons my to be read pile got so big is because after watching the news for 5 years and going into a pandemic and all that stuff, I really didn't want to read anything at all. It's just everything piled up. It's not that I don't enjoy reading, it's that I just wanted to veg out. I watched a lot of cartoons because
understandable. Yeah.
Everything gets resolved in 30 minutes. And,
I hadn't thought of that frame that way, but now that you say it, that just makes a whole lot of sense to me, because that's essentially what happened to me too. I've mentioned earlier in the show, my day job, I'm a newspaper reporter. And, when in March, when, the shutdowns began in earnest across the country and here in my community, and the cases, the number of actual positive cases began to rise, and the like, that consumed not just my attention when I wasn't at work, but everything in my job, whether it was covering government or covering the arts or whatever, suddenly had something to do with the pandemic, and the intensity and the intensity of attention that acquired, I would say, tripled, quadrupled, quintupled, and still hasn't really slowed down that much. And so I got very little reading done at all. And so, maybe looking at it from that direction, it then becomes really hard for the titles that people hadn't already made up their mind that they were going to read, to reach people.
Because they're vegging out, you guys mean?
Yeah. That
well, I've got a counterpoint.
Sure.
This is talking about movies, so I would think books would apply too, but the title is "Why Watching Scary Movies May Help Your Anxiety." And I'm not going to sit here and read the whole article, but here's a key paragraph. Scary movies create a situation where the worry becomes focused on something separate from yourself, which I'd never seen it phrased quite that way before, and it makes a lot of sense. This is from Allure, written by someone with generalized anxiety disorder. So,
well, I personally want millions of people to adopt that tactic.
Yeah. Well, so the question is often asked, why do we read horror? Why do we watch horror? These horrible things. Right there's a good reason, because we can be anxious about that. It gets resolved in one way or another, and then it's over.
Right. I think the difference between a book and a movie is that is what you just talked about. The movie, for good or bad, everything will be resolved in about an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, and you can sort of turn your brain off, unlike a book.
Right. So the book that's a good week commitment sometimes, and you don't get that resolution. It might be a better in a long run, but we live in a MTV society where we want everything done in 3 minutes or an hour and 45 minutes now.
You know, I keep thinking about that speech that Sam Gamgee made in the two.
Isn't it a TikTok society now? Isn't it?
What?
Sure.
Yeah, maybe. That Sam Gamgee made on the Two Towers, about, you know, the darkness can only be here for a little while. Eventually the sun will shine.
Right.
And I think that's what we're moving into now, and I'm grateful. But for my part, a lot last year, I watched a lot of comfort food too, Pete, which is probably different from your comfort food. But, you know, I watched Smallville and Angel and Buffy, you know, these kind of simple programs that I've seen, you know, 20 times,
Yep.
but that's kind of comfort food for me.
Yep.
And yeah, it's resolved after the end of each episode. It's resolved.
Yeah.
So,
for it, growing up, we used to watch the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island and everything was, there was conflict, drama, and resolution in 30 minutes, and even less because there were commercials.
right. Exactly.
So
24 minutes or so.
yeah. But, and if there's this interesting concept where, prior to the pandemic, a lot of companies, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney, were dropping all their things in big chunks and saying, here, go binge watch this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the shows flashed for about 3 weeks, and then they were gone.
Forget your problems. Binge watch this. And
Right. Disney broke the mold with The Vision and Scarlet Witch and dropped an episode a week. And for 6 to 8 weeks, kept everybody really interested. And people jumped online and dissected every episode and said, oh, this means that, and that character is this, and this is going to happen. This is like, and it's friggin' free publicity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's essentially the pandemic version of talking around the water cooler.
Yeah, true.
And it kept our minds off of things.
It also generated more discussion than if they'd have dropped all the episodes at once.
Right. And there were people coming out. It was like, oh, I hate this. And there was an article that came out. It's like, we literally have forgotten how to watch television. We can't. There are people who can't wait a week for an episode, and we have to learn to watch television again.
For the record, my comfort food Netflix watches during the pandemic were Hannibal, which I had not seen before, and which is an amazing.
It's a rom-com. Yeah, it's very romantic comedy.
And Evil. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I guess it's a show that originally started on CBS, but now most people are discovering it.
I don't know. I tried it, but for some reason I stopped watching.
Is that the one with
Mike Coulter?
Yes.
Britt and I both liked it.
I mean, I'm not criticizing. My Anita and I loved it, and there is so. If you watch any one part of it, I mean, if there is an episode, it's several episodes in. There's an episode where Mike Coulter's exorcist type character is in a hospital, in a hospital, and I thought it was maybe the most terrifying 40 minutes of television I've ever seen.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Scared the hell out of me.
I think that show has a great cast and a smart script.
I watched it. It was not bad.
Sure.
But that hospital episode is outstanding.
Oh yeah.
You were really worried for him, and you were wondering how the heck is he going to get out? because every time you thought he made it, they pulled the rug out from under you.
It was very well done. Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed the title of what you guys are talking about.
Well, this is an episode of Evil. I don't remember the title of the specific.
I think I've watched the first two.
It's among probably the last 5 episodes of Evil.
Right.
Okay.
Did it
Right.
go-
So you got to go through episodes that aren't quite as intense to get to it. But
Mike Kohler ends up getting stuck in a hospital as an insane nurse,
Ugh,
planning to murder him.
Oh man.
And he keeps thinking he's going to escape, or he's going to contact the doctor, or contact the other nurse. And every time it looks like he's going to do it, the evil nurse intervenes and gets back on track on secretly poisoning him and everything. It was scary as heck. It was suspenseful as heck.
Well, that sounds like it's good, but it also sounds like it's not my cup of tea. So
Right. You don't like some of that stuff.
right.
no, I don't like people being held against their will.
Hey, Mike,
Right,
I gotta go.
Oh, you do? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm. I haven't had any food yet. So,
You don't want to get the hangries.
yeah, no, my blood sugar's dropping, so I'm gonna take off. And
All right,
Thank
buddy.
you, Peter,
Thanks
for
for
being
being
here
here.
and for your impending review and your nice comments and questions.
No,
Yeah, I'm going to try to have that out on the blog tomorrow. Lovecraft eZine site.
give it a. Make sure I didn't spell anything wrong.
I will.
Okay.
I'm used to it.
All right. Good night, guys.
Thanks, Pete.
Bye.
See ya. So, okay, before we finish, excuse me, talking with you, Mike, tell me, give the audience a few more details about a Sinister Quartet,
Okay.
because you had the concept for this book and you contacted the other 3 writers. Is that correct?
Right. I'm gonna try and make. I'm gonna see if I can compress this. The story of how the book came together is actually in the back of the book.
Okay. Great.
But Scott Nicolay actually is responsible for this book existing in the first place.
Oh,
But
that guy.
Yeah, that guy. But in kind of a convoluted. I guess I should get it back out here, shouldn't I? In kind of a convoluted way.
He's been translating some Jean Ray books. I don't know if you've seen them that are very
Oh
good.
yeah. I've got the
Great
very
translations.
I've got the very first one, and I'm eager to get more to add it to my own growing to be read pile.
Yeah, he sent me the Great Nocturnal and something else that I can't think of right now, but yeah, they're good.
Yeah, he's doing a terrific job. So I had written a novella called The Comforter, or I was contemplating writing it, which is the 3rd story in the sequence that begins with my little horror tale, The Button Bin, which was a Nebula Award finalist, and then that was continued in a novella called The Quilt Maker, that was released as in this like very, very limited hand-bound edition by Pop-Up Area Press. You can see more people peeling their skin off on the cover here.
Of course.
Yeah. And
I can see why you wrote a story for Punktown.
Yeah, well,
For in Punktown.
I'm still just so flattered that Jeffrey, recruited me to be part of that. He's such a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
And so Scott made a proposal of that maybe this novella idea I had could be part of could be part of like a flip book, like one of those Ace doubles, if you remember those, with another novella backing it up. And he asked me who my thoughts might be for who would do that with me. And the person I suggested was C.S.E. Cooney. That's Claire Cooney. And my relationship with Claire Cooney is through my Mythic Delirium Books company. I published her debut short story collection actually, it's a collection of novellas called Bone Swans, which for those of you listening, I'm holding up before the camera, and it has very, it has very fairy tale-ish art to it, not horror. Claire is more of a fantasy and fairy tale and mythological sort of writer. And this book ended up winning the World Fantasy Award in 2016.
Nice.
Much to the shock of everybody involved, but to also their delight. And so I suggested her and had some talks with her about what she might contribute, and she had an idea. And then this idea didn't end up panning out, at least not in the way Scott had proposed it might unfold. And to try and make this really short, I got to thinking, I have a publishing imprint. Maybe I could bring this proposed book out so that it could actually exist. And I proposed that to Claire. She was game. Although her contribution, which is called The Twice Drowned Saint, ended up being quite a bit longer than we originally imagined. That's part of why the book is so fat. It's very fat.
It's a novella. Hey, you mentioned your
well,
imprint.
actually, hers is a novel. Hers,
Okay.
The Twice Drowned Saint is a novel.
You mentioned your imprint, and I linked to your Amazon page in the show notes. But can you share your website address with the audience?
I can do that.
Mike, I put it in the eZine
Oh, you
Facebook
just
page
did.
as well as
Yes.
in the
Yeah, thank you.
YouTube
Yeah.
chat.
Mythicdelirium.com.
Mythicdelirium.com. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. And most of my books are also available through that site, either because I ended up getting the rights to them back or because I just published them myself. There's a bit of each. And so as Claire and I were talking it over, we got the idea of maybe maybe expanding it so it wasn't just the two of us. And that is how Jessica Wick's novella An Unkindness, which is a dark fantasy that involves a kind of adventure into the fairy realm that is considerably more gruesome than you might think of when you hear the word fairy tale, and also Amanda McGee's Viridian, which is a modern retelling of Bluebeard, and she did it in a very, very original way. That still kind of gets me excited when I think about it, when I'm talking about it. I want people to experience it. So that's how those got added in, and it became a Sinister Quartet.
I like it. Yeah. Is that available in ebook as well?
Yes. Okay. Everything, all of these Unseaming, Aftermath, Bone Swans, Sinister Quartet, it's all available in just about all possible ebook formats.
That just triggered a memory. PS Publishing, really fine publishing outfit in the UK, recently started doing ebooks, as you know, Matt. Not sure if they're doing it for every book or not, but they've started doing them. Well, I heard from Ramsey Campbell that they're republishing Dark Gods soon. So I sent him a message yesterday because I asked Ramsey, do you know a date? And he said, no, but sometime soon. And I'm like, so I just contacted PS Publishing and I said, hey, you guys got a date? And is there going to be an ebook version? And if I'm really lucky, an audio version. I'd love to have somebody read Children of the Kingdom, listen to that. So, but I've been wanting to announce that, so you made me think of that. So not to take away attention from you, but so
well, I'm glad they're doing that. Nowadays
it's a little harder to find than it used to be.
I know, once upon a time people were very skeptical of ebooks. Nowadays, if you're not doing them, you're just leaving money on the table.
Right. Yep. All right, Mike. Thank you for being a guest.
Well, did you want me to stay on for the movie and book part?
I would love it if you stayed while we
Okay.
geeked out for the rest of the show.
Sure,
So,
sure. I'm willing to
yeah.
do that.
Folks, hey, if you're gonna buy a Mike Allen book today, buy The Unseaming, and let's see if we can get him over the 10,000. And you know, you'll be happy with the result with reading it. I know that. So, and I linked to his Amazon page, so you can just browse through his books and it'll have books that anthologies that he's contributed stories to there as well, I believe.
Yes.
And then his website is mythicdelirium.com. So, so thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Yeah, I hope you. Stay. So,
thank you for having me on, and I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer. Sure.
All right. So Melissa, who ditched us to go do something really cool with her husband, is she watching an outdoor film somewhere? Is that what she said?
It's in a Lost Romero film.
Oh, right.
I assume that's the director of Night of the Living Dead.
I can see why she ditched us. So, all right. Well, anyway, regarding Melissa, it was her suggestion that we sort of talk about horror movies and books, that horror movies we've seen and books we've read so far this year. Does anybody want to start with that?
Bridget does. Yeah.
Bridget does. Okay.
Put me on the bus.
No pressure.
Gosh, no pressure. You know, I have a lot of anthologies on my Kindle, and I switch back and forth. Like, I'll read a story here and a story there.
Yeah.
So that's been most of my reading this year. It's kind of like Mike and Pete were saying earlier, just like the focus, you know, being able to read a book all the way through. But then, so most of the longer books that I've been reading have been on Audible. So actually halfway through Blackfire Concerto right now on Audible.
Oh,
Halfway
wow.
through what?
Halfway through Blackfire Concerto right now on Audible.
That's my novel. Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, thank you.
Movies, I have not really seen a lot of new movies that we haven't already talked about on here.
Yeah,
I'm
too
gonna
bad
hold up
Pete had to
Blackfire
leave.
Concerto
Has
real
anybody
quick.
seen? Oh yes. Woo. Has anybody seen Conjuring yet? I haven't watched that one yet.
It's not available for streaming until July 4th, I thought.
It's on HBO Max.
Oh, it is? It's available now?
Yeah,
What
it
show?
popped up on HBO Max.
The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. It's another Conjuring movie, which I really liked Conjuring 1 and 2, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the way they play Ed and Lorraine Warren. That draws me into that franchise.
Yeah, because the real people are assholes from what I hear.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So these are the fictionalized
I've heard that too.
nice
Yes.
versions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, Bridget, anything else you want to mention?
Anything else? Now you're putting me on the spot. I can't think of anything.
Okay. Anybody else before I go?
I actually, Mike, since you asked me if I wanted to be part of this, I actually sort of, I gave it some thought and sort of put together a little spiel, if you
Go right ahead.
tolerate that. So, I've said earlier that I haven't gotten to read many books, but it's not true that I haven't read any books. There are basically two types of books that I have read, books that I'm considering publishing, and books where somebody has sent me the manuscript because they were asking for a blurb. And I wanted to highlight Jeffrey Thomas's The American, which folks have probably also already highlighted on that show. But what a merciless slab of suspense and horror and ambiguous morality that book is. I mean, it's just it deserves all the attention it can possibly get.
I've said this before, but I'm truly amazed that Jeff Thomas and Scott Thomas are not widely known. You know, say like a Josh Mallerman or, you know, Chuck Wendig or people like that, because they deserve to be. You know, they're just
agreed.
Yeah.
Now, I've having mentioned the American, so this is where I dig into the to be read pile. You know, a couple of recent purchases of mine that, sorry, Jeff, if you end up listening to or watching this, I haven't gotten to yet, but you know, his collection, the Unnamed Country, which I'm holding up, which has this neat, this came out from Word Horde and has this really neat kind of surreal, kind of science fictionish looking cover, even though it's not set in Punktown. You know, Jeff has said multiple times that, you know, this is his favorite book of his recent work, and I feel like, you know, that is enough reason that people ought to be taking a look at it themselves. And then I also have, this is one that I fear is probably just way under people's radar, and I'm hoping to fix that a little bit here.
Carrion Men.
Yeah, this is Carrion Men. This is a new collection. This is a collection curated by Scott Dwyer, who is the editor of a teeny but very ambitious press called Plutonian Press. And now I should confess that I do kind of have a dog in this fight, because you know, Scott has bought work from me for past and future projects. You know, this is his previous two books were anthologies, and this is his first collection that he's brought out by a solo author. And the table of contents, at least, is very fascinating to me, but I haven't read it yet, so I'm not able to do what Peter just did and review it. I'm just saying, you know, this is something that I have bought and intend to read, and folks, you ought to know that this exists. And you know, this is kind of the spiel part, is just to talk a little bit more about Plutonian Press. These are the previous two anthologies, Phantasm Chimera and Pluto in Furs. I'm in both of these, but you know, there's a lot of other very interesting people in them too. John Paget, Olivia Llewellyn, Matt Bartlett, Adam Galinsky, and Scott has this particular, I don't know, I am not particularly great at like being scholarly or literary critical or whatever. So I mean, I the best that I can kind of phrase it is he's kind of going for this really intense, boundary pushing version of the weird. Mm-hmm. In what he puts together. And of course, Pluto in Furs is a play on Venus in Furs. so that's a little bit of fun. And he's putting together an anthology currently called Pluto in Furs Volume 2. I don't know if he's going to continue with that as the title, but he bought 2 stories from me for that book. That's the first time that's ever happened in my entire career that someone's bought 2 short stories from me for a book.
Nice.
so I'm very proud about that.
One of those stories, you mentioned John and Livia, 2
right,
very, very talented people, and then you mentioned Matt Bartlett. I have to say that Matt Bartlett is dead to me now after his Facebook post this morning.
I have not seen that Facebook post.
Well, I don't remember which movie he talked about, but he basically, and this is blasphemy, said that the Lord of the Rings trilogy was not very good, in so many words.
The Lord of the Rings movie trilogy, or the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
No, the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy.
Huh.
So
that, you know, it is, he's not dead to me for saying that, but that is something that might require some splaining.
Yeah, no, he's not really dead to me. Matt's a great guy, but he's just totally wrong on this, and there's, you know,
right. Right. So
totally and completely wrong. Yeah, but Matt's a very talented writer. Yeah.
So these books, if you look up Plutonian Press, yeah, as in the planet Plutonian Press, that's where you find them. And I also want to mention this is not
Planet.
this is not a horror novel exactly. This is a novel by Jamie Lee Moyer, Divine Heretic. For those of you listening, it's got kind of a church window stained glass cover. It is a retelling of the life of Joan of Arc that, imagines that the voices she was hearing were demonic presences that she is trying to fight. It's again, it's not horror, but it's got a strong dark fantasy flavor. And this book was actually originally published in the UK through Joe Fletcher Books, but it is 2 days away from a USA debut.
Oh, nice.
So I felt like I should plug this by Jamie.
I've had that thought. If you think you're hearing the voice of God, how do you really know it's God?
Right. Maybe you just assume.
Yeah. maybe it's the guy who's running the simulation. You don't know.
Right.
Oh, well,
so that was my
let's just offend all of France right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like the Eiffel Tower either. Ha.
Well,
all of France is offended.
I'm in the middle of several books. So I'm looking at my Goodreads right here to remind me. Goblin by Josh Malerman. I'm listening to that one. And it reminds me of 80s horror. Well, even the cover looks sort of like 80s horror. So I don't know if any of you have read this yet, but it's about this small town called Goblin where it's always raining and weird things happen. So that hooked me right away. So I don't know. I'm about 15% into it so far. So I just started that. When Things Get Dark, which is an anthology tribute to Shirley Jackson, edited by Ellen Datlow. The stories I've read so far are really good. She sent me an arc. It's going to come out on, I think it's August 18th. It's sometime in August, but you can go to Amazon and pre-order it. So if you're a Shirley Jackson fan and Ellen Datlow fan, you really have to get this. And then I've plugged this before, but I'm still in the middle of a collection called Strange Little Horrors by Amy Cross. And there's a story in there that is just one of the best I've ever read. I think I mentioned the title before, but I'm not gonna mention it again. But when you read it, you guys read it. If you get a chance to read it, you have to tell me what you think. So forget the title. It's something about the fourth wall, something like that. And I'm about to start Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chizmar, which will also be out in August. Which
title?
Yeah, well, speaking of breaking the fourth wall, it's in the summer of 1988. The mutilated bodies of several missing girls turn up in a small Maryland town. The grisly evidence leads police to the terrifying assumption that a serial killer is on the loose in the quiet suburb. But soon a rumor begins to spread that the evil stalking local teens is not entirely human. This is Richard Chizmar, if I didn't say. Law enforcement, as well as members of the FBI, are certain that the killer is a living, breathing madman, and he's playing games with them. For a once peaceful community trapped in the depths of paranoia and suspicion, it feels like a nightmare that will never end. Now, here's the part that got me. Recent college graduate Richard Chizmar returns to his hometown just as a curfew is enacted and a neighborhood watch is formed. He soon finds himself thrust into the real-life horror story. So, Richard Chizmar's in the book. So
getting a bit meta there. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Getting a lot meta. So that's what I'm reading. Let me see here. If I can find, here it is. I mentioned the Twisted Ones, which is the white people. It's kind of white people adjacent. And Mackin, yes, I'm gonna. It occurred to me to try and get that author to come on, Rick, because I think you'd probably enjoy talking with her.
Yes.
Of course, the Suicide Motor Club and Crossroads, sorry, by Laurel Hightower, which is a really gut punch of a book. And then want to read, let me just, here's some that I'm going to be reading soon. This one's not out yet either. I think I'm going to get her on the show, but it's up in the air. The Last House on Needless Street. It looks really, really interesting. Stephen King says the hype is real. In a boarded up house, it's by Catriona Ward. In a boarded up house on a dead end street at the end of wild Washington woods lives a family of 3. A teenage girl who's not allowed outside, not after last time. A man who drinks alone in front of his TV, trying to ignore the gaps in his memory. And a house cat who loves napping and reading the Bible. An unspeakable secret binds them together, but when a new neighbor moves in next door, what is buried out among the birch trees may come to haunt them all. This just sounds really fascinating to me. And of course, I bought Cody Goodfellow's The Flying Nun, N-O-N-E. I'm going to read that. What else here? A book called Halloween Fiend looks real good. I don't know when it was published, but it's another one of those small town hooks that always gets me. String isn't the small, quaint town it appears to be. It's hunted every night by a creature the townsfolk refer to as Halloween. Once the sun sets each day, Halloween emerges to collect its treats, a small live offering from each household. The residents comply because no one wants to be the target of Halloween's tricks. But the nightmare of residing in String is nothing compared to the yearly ritual Halloween demands of the citizens on All Hallows Eve. But this just sounds so freaking completely fucking off the wall that I had to get it. I've got it on, it's on Kindle Unlimited. So it's called Halloween Fiend, F-I-E-N-D, by C.V. Hunt. So that's definitely worth checking out. And it's on my TBR list. There's a bunch on my TBR list, about 50 right now, but I won't bore you guys with all of them, but those are the highlights. Matt or Rick, do you guys want to say anything? Matt left. Probably had to go feed his kids again.
Well, I'll just cite 2 anthologies that we mentioned earlier this year on the program. Under Twin Suns by James Chambers.
Oh, yes. And it's got a previously unpublished Joe Pulver novella in that. Yeah.
It's a King and Yellow themed anthology.
Yeah, I can't wait to read that.
I'm alternating between that and Sisterhood by Chaosium, which has female cosmic horror writers. S.P. Makowski, Olivia Llewellyn. And it's still for based on those 2 stories. They're very well done. And Livia connects in the Joe Pulver's universe. But I'm going to deviate outside the box now.
Please.
We'll go into heroic fiction.
All right.
And what I just ordered and am dying to read is a novel called The Hunchback by Paul Faval that was first published in the 19th century. And even though it only appeared in English in a garbled translation, it was a major influence on French heroic fiction like the Three Musketeers and everything else that Alexander Dumas wrote.
Yeah.
And the premise is there is this hero impersonates a hunchback to spy on a group of swindlers. by day, and at night is the Avenger who's defeating duelists by stabbing them in the forehead. And its whole plot was highly reworked for the first Antonio Banderas Zorro movie, The Mask of Zorro.
Anything else you want to mention?
Just mainly that this year on television, I've been watching WandaVision, Winter Soldier, and The Falcon.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have an intervention with you about all the Marvel stuff.
But
No, it's good. I'm a DC guy, and even I think it's great stuff.
also Invincible, the animated series on Amazon.
Oh, that is so good.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, it's great.
What about this? Go ahead.
It's an R-rated cartoon. Let's just say that. This is the most violent cartoon.
Incredibly violent.
It is. It goes to levels of violence you would imagine.
What about this? Speaking of superheroes, this Jupiter's Legacy. I've heard it's not good, so I haven't bothered with it.
I thought it was good.
You thought it was good?
I wouldn't say it was incredibly great. It was entertaining enough, but it leaves a lot unresolved.
And
Yeah.
now it won't be resolved.
Right. Yeah,
No
it got
season
canceled.
2?
Yeah,
Oh,
it got
really?
canceled.
Oh, then it's not worth watching.
Yeah. All right. If you're done, Rick,
Okay, yeah, I'm done.
I forgot to mention a couple upcoming that I do want to read that look interesting to me. This is called Tide Pool. It's by an author by the name of Nicole Wilson, and it's being billed as Lovecraftian dark fantasy. Gets a modern treatment. My cat just jumped on the back of my chair.
Oh, kitty.
Lord, I think he was up there too.
Oh my gosh. It was funny because you couldn't see him with your background until he was right
I knew
there.
it was him though. He's the only one who does it. So it's billed as Lovecraftian dark fantasy gets a modern treatment in this terrifying debut novel. See, that's the kind of professionalism that people are used to on this show. Cats jumping everywhere, you know.
I approve.
Okay. Yeah.
I think all professional podcasts need cats
It reminds me,
intervening at odd times.
it
Yeah.
reminds me of an old movie with Peter Cushing called The Uncanny, where cats were secretly running the universe.
There you go.
Before I continue, Kenneth says Halloween Fiend is weird. I enjoyed it. The audiobook version is great. Ross says excellent cat cameo. That was planned, Ross. Thank you.
Hi, Ross.
Yeah. All right. So the description of this book, if you give not willingly, the Lords will rise. In 1913, Henry Hamilton disappeared while on a business trip, and his sister, Sorrow, great name, won't rest until she finds out what happened to him. Defying her father's orders to remain at home, she travels to Tide Pool, the last place Henry is known to have visited. Residents of the small, shabby oceanside town can't quite meet Sorrow's eyes when she asks about her brother. When corpses wash up on shore looking as if they've been torn apart by something not quite human, Sorrow is ready to return to Baltimore and let her father send in the professional detectives. I won't read the whole thing. Sorrow discovers Tide Pool's dark, deadly secret. With this discovery, some denizens of Tide Pool, human and otherwise, are hell-bent on making sure Sorrow never leaves their forsaken town. Lovecraftian dark fantasy gets a modern treatment in this terrifying debut novel. I'm getting Innsmouth vibes from this, so I guess we'll see. But it really looks really interesting. Another one, and this one looks interesting to me because we've been talking about Japanese folklore recently, off and on here on the show. And it's called Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Kaw.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Khaw, and it comes out on October 19th. that's all I'll say about it. You can look it up, but it just looks very interesting to me. So yeah, those were two I forgot to mention.
I want to mention, since you mentioned Cassandra Caw, she
Yeah.
she has a 2-book series of novellas that came out through Tor.com. The first one is Hammers on Bone, and the second one is called A Song for Quiet. I believe that's the title. And they are, in fact, they are explicitly Lovecraftian stories.
Okay.
And if you've already talked about these on then please shut me up. But
No.
The main character, the main character, I hope I'm going to get the race right, is the main character is a member of the great race of Yith. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's not Yig, but Yith, who has possessed a hard-boiled Sam Spade detective type.
There you go.
It's a delightful concept. Yes. So
Okay.
just wanted to say there's others of hers to look at if you have an interest in horror.
Yeah, I think she's pretty well known. I haven't gotten into her yet, but I will probably start with this one. Let's see. Anything else, guys?
I since Mike Allen mentioned something, was anybody else traumatized by Edgar Allan Poe when they were very young?
I'd like to know.
I wasn't traumatized. I just enjoyed it.
Okay.
Annabelle Lee was my favorite poem for like 10 years growing up.
Okay.
Which one?
Annabelle Lee.
Oh yeah.
I was traumatized at 5 years old by the movie version of The Premature Burial.
Oh
My
yeah.
brother.
Roger Corman.
You're my long-lost brother.
and Hazel Court.
I take it back. That's the only story that really ever got to me because I'm kind of claustrophobic.
Well, when I saw the movie, my mother took me to double feature, and my brother, and the other movie was Journey to the Seventh Planet, which was a sci-fi film which I could just had monsters and didn't bother me at all. But Premature Burial had worms residing in wine and all sorts of weird stuff.
Oh, man.
And he buries his wife alive at the end. That just freaks me out.
Some people online were talking about a bit, I don't remember where, about Legati. And it brought me back to when I discovered Legati. It was in an anthology. I think it was called Nightmare or something close to that. It was a pretty huge anthology. And this is about 20 years ago, I think. And I just picked it up secondhand somewhere. And Legati's story, Dream of a Mannequin or Dreams of a Mannequin. Oh, yeah. I need to reread it. But that was my introduction to him, and it blew me away. I thought it was creepy as hell.
Was that a hardcover anthology?
Not the one I have. It might have been.
Okay.
I first encountered him in an anthology called Foundations of Fear, which was edited by David Hartwell, and it was essentially the sequel to The Dark Descent. And Legati's story was the final. It's the final story in the book, and it's called Notes on the Writing of Horror. So it has this sort of meta element to it, and that it starts out it starts out talking about how to write a horror story, and then sort of devolves, into the essay writer like murders several people, and it was just terrifically done. But I compulsively feel the need to mention, since you brought him up, that Thomas Ligotti blurbed Unseaming, which was one of the most amazing things that.
Oh,
has
yeah,
ever
I saw
happened
that.
to me. Yeah,
It looks like this is also in Songs of a Dead Dreamer. That's not where I first discovered it, but yeah, Dream of a Mannequin, spelled differently than the usual, is
right.
yeah. So Songs of a Dead Dreamer, but I know I've got this book somewhere in the house, but oh well. All right. Anything else, guys?
Did you also want to talk about like movies?
Well, yeah, I was
looking
just gonna.
forward to. Or-
Well, I saw a movie preview yesterday of a movie called Infinite. It looks like it's now. I am not by any stretch of the imagination a Mark Wahlberg fan,
Gotcha,
but
gotcha.
this could go either way, I suppose. But it looks like a reincarnation movie and action orientated, so it might be a good popcorn movie. But
So
yeah.
if we were going to talk about movies, I wanted to be sure to plug the Block Island Sound. If folks have
yeah, we've talked about that one.
Okay, so that's not news here then.
No, but it's always worth repeating. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other movies you want to talk about?
Well, I watched sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I still think The Empty Man is the best Lovecraftian film of the year so far.
Which one is it?
The Empty Man.
Okay.
Yeah, I've actually got to add to the movies page on the site. I've got to add The Empty Man, The Dead Center, and apparently, thank you to Cameron Howard, and I think one other person who pointed this out to me, I've got the wrong Borderlands on there, so I'll fix that too. But it's a nice list. I think most of you listening probably know about it, but if you don't, just go to lovecraftezine.com and click on, wow, do I remember? Hover over Lovecraftian movies and then click on Mike's list of recommended Lovecraftian movies. And I'll add The Empty Man and The Dead Center and fix Borderlands.
Dead Center
So.
was really good too. Yeah.
I watched
Yeah.
Willy's Wonderland.
That's scary in its own right.
It's not Lovecraftian, but if you want Nick Cage beating the hell out of inanimate objects for a couple hours,
Isn't that every Nick Cage movie these days?
Yeah, well, yeah, this one especially leans into it.
The guy's getting like ubiquitous. He's
Right.
everywhere.
I'm kind of enjoying the Nick Cage is sort of the new final guy in horror movies trend.
Yeah, we're in the age of Nick Cage when it comes to horror.
Nick Cage, final guy. That's great.
So, Bridget, did you see The Dead Center when Matt had it on movie night? Is it good?
I liked it. It was.
And it is Lovecraftian, you guys said. Or is it?
Perhaps.
Okay.
I would say cosmic horror.
Yeah, that's what I mean, really. Yeah.
But it's definitely nihilistic, I guess, at the end. It's pretty great.
Okay. And I've seen The Empty Man, and I agree. That's a Lovecraftian, the cosmic horror, whatever film.
Yeah, I would say it's more Lovecraftian than Dead Center, but not to say that one's better than the other. But
well, it's not a question of better; it's a question of should I put it on that list or not.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think that's everything. Unless you guys got something else. Mike, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
I'm glad. Next week, let's see who we have. We have Trevor Henderson and Jed Shepard. Trevor Henderson's an artist that's become very, very popular lately, and he's doing a game of some sort that I don't understand, but we'll understand next week because they'll tell us about it, with Jed Shepard, who is the director of Host, which I think everyone remembers Host. So those two guys are going to be on the show. I had invited Trevor, and then when I saw on a news site that they were doing this together, I emailed Jed and said, hey, you want to come on the show with Trevor? And he said, yeah, as long as it's okay with Trevor, which Trevor's pretty easygoing. So it was. So, and that's interesting. And then the week after that, Christopher Buhlman, you guys remember him? He wrote Those Across the River, The Lesser Dead, excuse me, and so forth. He's a John Horner Jacobs fan who we've had on the show a couple of times. So I said, "What?" He goes, "I'd love to talk to him someday." And I'm like, "Well, why don't you interview him?" And so they both agreed to this. So on June 20th, I'm going to just sit back and relax, and Christopher is going to interview John Horner Jacobs. So that'll be a lot of fun and an easy day for me. So, all right. I think that's it, except just remember what we've got coming up this week, which is on Tuesday. We've got the Old Time Radio event on YouTube. If you don't know where that's at, just Google Lovecraft eZine YouTube, and it's on the second list. 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then Patreon podcast, Rick actually, and Stephen Mark Rainey and I are going to discuss Dark Shadows on Thursday. If you're a Patreon, $5 and up, you can watch that live or listen to it later, just like these shows. And when I say the three of us are going to discuss it, what I mean is Rick and Steven are going to, Rick and Mark are going to discuss it, and I'm going to listen. So, because they're the experts and I'm not. But we had a request for that from one of the patrons, so we want to do that. All right. So thanks again, Mike. Glad you're on the show. And
thank you.
Thanks to
you
Bridget
so
and
much.
Rick. So thanks to those who got a couple new patrons during the show. Thank you guys. And thanks to those who did a little bit of super chatting and gave me a tip or two while the show was going on. I really appreciate it. So, and we will see everybody next week. Thanks, guys, and have a good night.